Welcome to Travels with Jack. I'm Jack Barron, the host of the show. And as always, we welcome our audience to please contact us here at FPAC and let us know if you'd like to be a guest on this show and share with the audience a recent trip you've had. You can talk about how you got there, the places you stayed, the things you saw, some of the shopping, people you met. We would love to have you as a guest. Tonight, we have Joel Winett as our guest. Joel has been with us before. Those of you who are regular viewers of the show had the wonderful experience of having Joel share with you his trip to China, which was just terrific and very interesting.
Thank you.
And we were lucky enough to entice him to return and share with us today a trip to Russia. Just a couple of brief things. Joel is a longtime Framingham resident. He is a town meeting member for 37 years. He is a former town moderator. He is currently chair of the Framingham Town Meeting Rules Committee. His previous history to earn the money to go on all these trips was as a software engineering manager. He's a dad with 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and a lovely wife. And the reason he went to Russia was he had an opportunity. His daughter and her husband were in Russia doing some work for a non-governmental organization. And they said, Dad, come on over and we'll show you around. So today, Joel is going to show us around a little bit. And in a way of thanking him for coming, I'm giving him a book I wrote, a new book called Nation of Tyranny. It's available at any of the major online booksellers. And Joel, I want you to have that.
Thank you very much.
Please enjoy it. It's a fun read and a fast read.
Good.
And I did it in a little bit larger lettering so people our age can read it. So if you would,
and the Nation of Tyranny is? What nation is it?
The Nation of Tyranny is about a former governor of the United States, and he wants to make sure we remain a free people. And that's a quick synopsis of it. I don't want to spend the show on the book. Tell us a little bit about your trip to Russia, how you got there, transportation, where you stayed, and we've got a lot of pictures to share with everybody.
Well, as you said, in August of 2004, we had this trip to Russia. It was unplanned until my daughter was going to Russia. Her husband was asked to spend a month in Russia, and he can bring his wife and 2 children, and they were there for a month. And they said, why don't you come and visit us? So we made our plans, made our reservations by the plane. We went from Boston to Paris and then transferred to St. Petersburg. And we spent a week in St. Petersburg. We stayed at we had an apartment. We rented an apartment through the internet, and so we had a 2-bedroom apartment for my daughter and her family of 4 people. They were in one room, and my wife and I were in another room. It was a nice apartment. It worked out fine since we're 6 people. We were at a good location, and we started our trip to go to see the sights, be with the family, and meet some people in the former Soviet Union. So that's our first stop being St. Petersburg. It's a city of rivers and canals, somewhat like Venice, that you can move around in water transportation. The first picture here you see is we cross a bridge and we go over the river Neva and to see the Peter and Paul Fortress. We view the rostrils, which are columns, from a distance. Up close, you can see...
Do those columns have any particular meaning? Or?
They were done to welcome the ships.
Okay.
And in the next slide, you'll see that the columns have sculptures on them. They are symbolic, meaning to signify the 4 great rivers. And those sculptures of the rivers are the Volga, the Neva, the Dnieper, if I pronounce it right, and the Volkhov rivers. And these ships welcome the model ships, welcome the ships into the harbor. And they're also, they're lighthouses, and they light up the area.
Oh, okay.
So that was our first tour, our first spot where
Did you get
we're headed
any
to.
information from any of the tour guides as to how St. Petersburg was built or how it evolved or some of that history? Maybe you can share it with our audience a little bit.
Well, it's a fortress. How St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg at one time was the capital of Russia.
Okay.
Remember, and when it was the capital, later moved to Moscow. So the emperors and the I guess they didn't have kings, the czars,
yep,
had their summer homes and their winter homes, and they make tourist places to tourists to go. Elaborate, beautiful, you could say like European palaces, but they're palaces in the Soviet Union for Russia, really.
For Russia. This picture we've got on the screen now, this is what?
This is the Peter and Paul church that you see from the river. And then in the next slide, we will continue and we'll land, and there's a close-up of the church. You see it, it's being cleaned. There are a number of tourists walking around. This is what,
a Russian Orthodox church?
I don't know exactly if it's used. It's on an island, on a fortress.
Okay.
But one of the things in the fortress, we went to a jail. My grandson was 6 years old at the time, and my granddaughter was 3 years old. So we went into the fortress. It's got barracks where the people sleep, and there was a jail. And my grandson didn't like going in the jail. Yeah, so
did you tell him if he doesn't behave, that's where he's going to end up?
That's where he ended up.
Okay.
But so we walked around as a tourist and to various places. And then when you go on, there's a gun mounted on treads towards, and that's what you see right there now. You see me and my grandson. We climbed on the gun mount and walking around the forest, and that was really fun for my grandson. Oh boy, we wouldn't want to be fighting with that.
It looks like I'm seeing very sunny skies. Did you have good weather?
Weather was, this was August, so
okay,
it was warm. Actually, it was too warm.
Yep.
In that apartment we rented, it wasn't air conditioned. So we opened the windows. But lo and behold, when you open the windows, in came the mosquitoes and the bugs.
Okay.
So that wasn't good. My son-in-law went out in the store, and he bought 3 fans. Paid $100 or $70 for a fan, and we put it in the room so we can shut the windows, and then we keep the bugs away. And then actually at the end, we gave them to our guides, because we had a driver and we had a guide that took us wherever we went.
Oh, so you had a very luxurious tour experience.
It was. I got spoiled in that trip.
I was gonna
Subsequently,
say.
I did the same thing on our China trip. But here, we get up in the morning, 9 o'clock, we had breakfast in the apartment.
Your family cooked, or you had a cook come in?
No, we didn't have cooks.
Really?
My wife and my daughter, when we were the cooks.
Did you go to a supermarket, or?
We bought bread and we bought cereal and once in a while, I think they even went out and got pizza when coming back and didn't want to go out again.
Okay.
Russia, you can live in Russia like you live in the United States, and you didn't realize it. And remember, this is 6 years ago, too. So we were in that apartment, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, we knew that the doorbell's going to ring. Our guide is going to come up and with our driver and take us to the various sites that we want to go to. So as I said, the first site was the fortress.
Yep.
And then after the fortress.
Oh wow! Look at this.
That is the That's the Church of the Savior, also known as the Church of Spilt Blood.
Okay.
The
Looks absolutely beautiful. I
Alexander
see the onion
II,
turbans there.
was assassinated at this spot, and his son Alexander III built this church on this location, and as you see, it's ornate.
Yes.
And it's typical Russian style, but this is a good picture. I like it with the clouds and the and I like the spires.
Yes,
it is.
I think that's unique. Building.
Unique in Russia. You don't see that maybe in Asia. You might see some churches with spires. So that is the Church of the Spilt Blood, and that's the top of it. And then you go on to our next place. The next space is the palaces. So this is the Pushkin Courtyard. Our next stop is the Pushkin. This is built by Catherine, sometimes called Catherine's Palace.
Yep.
The wife of Peter the Great. Peter the Great ruled Russia for 2 years. Catherine ruled Russia for 2 years after her husband's death. And this was originally commissioned by her husband. But again, you see spires, you see, I think the blue facade, it was very impressive.
Those buildings are very spectacular.
So they're pretty from the outside.
How did you find the transportation there in St. Petersburg or Moscow? Was there a lot of public transportation, buses, subways?
We had the car and the driver. So that's our transportation. When we went to a museum, they would drop us off in front. Yep. And sometimes the exit would be not the same as the way you went in. And our guide would call the driver with a cell phone and say, "We'll be outside in 10 minutes. Drive around." And so we go out, and there the driver is, and we're off to the next space.
Well, for those of us who may not be able to swing the driver and private tour guide.
It wasn't that expensive,
Oh, really? Okay.
Basically, I've also found that sometimes if you're with a tour with many people, and depending upon the accommodations, you save a little bit on accommodations, and you spend it on the guide. Okay. And so that works out real well. So we're at the palace, and now we go inside the rooms of the palace, and you'll see the throne room and various. There's tourists going around, and one thing we did find, sometimes you had to put on slippers or socks,
so you wouldn't hurt the parquet floors.
Right over your shoes, you put on these socks, really, and the socks keep the floor clean, and wherever you go, they're tourists.
Very ornate. I remember in Russia, we always saw a lot of fine woods for the floors, and the chandeliers were always, quite impressive.
And the next slide, you'll see the formal dining room, and that's all set up like museums with painting on the wall. But then sometimes in the corner, you might ask, what is that in the corner? That's a stove to heat the room. They didn't have central heating like we know it today. These are the palaces. But you're there to see the rooms, and sometimes you're there to see the pictures as well. So on the next slide, you're going to see the portrait hall and the hallways.
Now, are these tiles? Do you remember whether
tiled.
These? Oh, they are. Okay.
They're tiled and on the columns.
Yep.
And the roof is plaster sculpture, like in the Vatican.
Okay.
Where you paint on the plastic. So there's my wife in the center pointing at something on the roof, on the ceiling, and our guide giving us some explanation. And every inch of the wall is covered with paneling comprising 17th and 18th century canvases. And then one of the rooms is the legendary Amber Room, That room, it has all the stones, the gems, the amber gems, and it shows wealth.
Yes. I always remember it convinced me when I was in Russia and I had seen these grandiose palaces with, I mean, all the finest things the world probably had to offer. And these were for just one family, the family of the Tsar and perhaps some of their key court people. And the rest of the country was out in the fields as serfs, half starving, making it through a cold winter.
I mean, they know how to tax people, that's for sure.
And you clearly had an understanding of why there was the revolution they had in Russia, because there was such disparity between the wealthy and the poor. And I think to a degree we're seeing a similar situation unraveling today in the Middle East. You have these leaders like Gaddafi, who, what are they saying? He's got $33 billion tucked away, and
they go on forever. In Egypt, he's been the premier president of Egypt for 30 years.
Yep, and they're living the high life, and when the regular people aren't managing to have much of a life, it creates...
So I think in the revolution times, it was a lot about food.
Yep.
and standard of living. And now it's also about freedom to travel and freedom to speak. That's also what's, I think, happening in the Middle East world. But we're looking here now.
Isn't that handsome picture?
I said this is Petersburg, a city of canals and rivers, and these are the buildings.
This is what, the Hermitage Museum?
The Hermitage is on the right.
Hermitage Museum.
It's a Hermitage being it's a museum. I don't know if it was lived in. Oh, yes,
I think it was originally a palace.
That's right, it was a palace. And I remember one of the rooms there, they had secret passages to escape when they needed to. And that was one of the special rooms that were pointed out. But they're all, it's a museum, it's a gallery. They show European, French paintings, and of course they're proud of the Russian painters. And the buildings are clean. On the outside,
well maintained today.
I think also this was after they had the Olympics at one time, and all the cities clean up St. Petersburg for the tourists in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So after taking that ride and stopping at the museum and the Hermitage, next we're going to take a hydrofoil.
Oh wow!
This is it's a boat, a fast boat to go in the river to the summer palace of Peter the Great. There's the picture of the palace, of grounds, of fountains, a lot of tourists, and you can be outdoors. Now this was summertime; it was warm. It was in the 80s.
Okay.
So we didn't wear sport jackets. But you enjoyed the
And this big, huge house we're looking at was, quote unquote, just the summer place.
The summer palace of Peter the Great.
Yep.
Called now Peter House.
Yep.
And let's see, what would it be like here? That we have a big palace.
The Vanderbilt family home in the Biltmore.
Biltmore. That's
Yep.
in Nashville, I believe.
Outside. Oh wow! Look at this.
And so there's a picture of a room in the Peter House
Looks like
Palace.
a ballroom.
Again, yeah, I think it might be a ballroom. Again, parquet floors.
Yep.
I guess was able to get there without. Maybe the tourists didn't walk on there. You were just on one side. But you see the gold and the scrolls work. Precious wood and marble staircases. So St. Petersburg was a fun city.
Yeah.
I would say between the two, Moscow and St. Petersburg, I like St. Petersburg better.
Okay.
For the art and and the buildings. But for politics, we now go on to Moscow. And now this is where my daughter was living, and she had a bedroom. She had she had an apartment. 2 bedrooms upstairs in an apartment that had an up and down. Even she was on
duplex.
the 5th.
Yep.
No, she was on the 5th floor of an apartment.
Oh, okay.
With an elevator. Apartment was called the Park Place. To give you an idea, think of what we are. It was considered modern with our standards. The apartment had parquet floors, color TV, and a pull-out sofa where we slept. And again, now this time, instead of renting a car with a guide, my son-in-law had a driver and a guide at his disposal because he was working there. So the driver took him to work in the morning.
And spent the day touring you around.
And then came back and picked up us and picked up my daughter, and off we go.
Great. That sounds like the way to travel.
It definitely was very nice. So the rest of the day was ours. And so
we see the famous Russian onion domes.
Dome, and you see the brick wall, the red brick wall.
Yes.
That's the Red Square or the Kremlin.
Okay.
The Kremlin is really a walled city on a river. We're going to go inside the Kremlin, and we're going to see cathedrals and office buildings and churches. I think there were like 4 or 5 churches within the Kremlin. There are apartments, living buildings as well.
Now, has the Kremlin always been the seat of government in Russia?
I think it has been.
Really? Okay.
So on the next slide, you'll see a close-up of the church. Again, the onion skin.
Yeah.
And these inside, you see stucco buildings. Whereas in many of the others, in St. Petersburg, they seem to be marble on the outside. But this is called the Cathedral of the Annunciation in the Kremlin. And there were tourists, Americans, Europeans, all over, and as well as some Russians as well. So this is just a sample of what's inside the Kremlin. We also passed by office buildings where the premier was, but that we didn't let us in.
Okay, and you didn't meet with...
No officers.
No. The president of the country.
That would have been Putin. Putin would have been.
So Putin didn't have lunch with you over there?
Didn't get to do that.
Did you get to eat any snacks on the streets? Did you find any good food vendor kind of situations? Or
I don't think we actually bought anything on the street.
Okay, so it wasn't like China where you had food vendors everywhere.
No. Remember now, whether it was St. Petersburg or Moscow, this is a business area.
Okay.
You had cafeterias,
Yep.
And you'd go into a cafeteria. For lunch, or we would go like we would go here, up and down the lines, and pick out the food you want. So in Moscow is almost like a New York City.
Really? So was any like large cosmopolitan city?
And maybe not like New York, because it had big highways.
Yep.
Auto dealerships around the corner from where my daughter's apartment was. You had to go through underpasses to get across the street.
Okay, so you wouldn't get run over?
Let's see, New York City doesn't do that. Boston doesn't have any of those. But some cities, in order to get on the other side of the street, you have to go underneath and up and over. But now we're going to get a little bit of view of Red Square. A red square known because of the red bricks, in contrast to the stucco and gold, which was inside the Kremlin. And this is the museum on one side of the square. And in front of the museum is a statue of Marshal Zhukov.
And who was Marshal Zhukov?
Well, he was supposed to be known as the greatest generals in military history.
Okay.
He was actually the early, let's see, he was born in 1896, and he was in the Red Army from 1955 to 1957. He was a minister of Soviet Union. And he worked in World War II to liberate Russia from the Germans. And Russia was occupied.
Yes.
And St. Petersburg was damaged in the war. So,
for some of our younger viewers who may not be tremendously familiar with World War II history, and somebody's going to call and correct me, but I think the Russians lost close to 22 million citizens in World War II fighting off Adolf Hitler and the German Axis.
I mean,
and for some of you, it's probably difficult who grew up as I did, always knowing Russia as our quote-unquote adversary in the Cold War, but we were allies in fighting off the Germans.
I mean, we were allies,
So-
Russia and France and England.
Yep.
And all of those were occupied by the Germans. I know England
Well,
wasn't
England was
occupied.
never occupied.
England wasn't occupied, but England was bombed.
England was bombed, and a little bit of history. Winston Churchill was the prime minister and did a fantastic job in taking on Hitler. And I personally thank Churchill for winning World War II on the European side. I think he was absolutely
Yeah, we won in Japan.
Yes.
And had to take care of the
Yep.
rebuilding of Japan. But in Europe, well, there was a lot of politics there.
But Russia was our ally in that. But I don't want to spend the,
Well, I
the,
mean, you're
the
looking
event educating our public on history.
Well, that's what a tour, a vacation tour to other countries is, learning about history.
Joel, I'm not going to argue with you. You're right.
And when I saw Red Square, I was thinking of Russia, the Kremlin. I mean, that's politics. It's almost like Tiananmen Square, which I later went
Yes.
into China. But this was first, before the China trip. And this is St. Basil's Cathedral.
This is an unbelievable Russian icon church.
It has 9 chapels inside there, and the colors are unmatched anywhere. It was said at one point that the building has scales like golden fish, enameled like the skins of a serpent, and changeful colors like a lizard, and glossy rose and azure like a pigeon's neck. That's a quote. But I just, this is for a photographer. When you travel, you like to take pictures. And I just found that there was a lot of places to take pictures, these churches.
No, it's a magnificent building. And I had always heard a story. I don't know if it's confirmed that the architect of St. Basil's was asked by the, at that time, the Tsar, will you ever build anything else like this? And he said, well, maybe I will. And the Tsar had his eyes closed up permanently. I'm being nice for television. And so that he could never draw it again or recreate St. Basil's.
I don't know, for example, how long it takes to build it. To build cathedrals, I mean, the cathedral in Washington, D.C. Took 20 years, I think, to build.
As you talk about cathedrals and building them, it reminds me of the Cathedral Famiglia in Barcelona, Spain, which Gaudi started, I think, 100 years ago, and they're still building. So cathedrals can take a long time.
A long time. And the money either comes from the parishers or it comes from the government.
Well,
So
we're not planning any cathedrals in Framingham this week,
No.
so don't get nervous.
So we've seen some of these slides or pictures now have been about buildings, the outside. Now we're going to see some street scenes, and this is a statue of Lenin. Lenin, the founder of
The modern Soviet Union.
Communism, the leader in the October 17th revolution, and from October 17 to 1917 to 1924, he led the Red Army in the Russian Civil War, and he's the philosopher, and he and Marx defined the communist philosophy. And so this looks like with a raincoat or a heavy overcoat, but he is still, he's an icon in Russia because that's part of their history. So that's one stop as we drive along. We see the different places. The next slide you're going to see is called the White House. Now, the White House from us is where our president lives. Their White House is the Russian Parliament building.
Oh, wow.
And now, I don't really know about their parliament system, but they do make laws, and they
No, they have a Duma, I believe they call it.
Duma
They have an
is that
upper and lower chamber, similar to we would have our House
Senate?
of Representatives and our Senate. I don't know whether they have a budget or not, though, which
Well,
we don't.
They must, we don't have a budget. They may be no different than we are. But you know,
Some
that-
of you, as this show probably will be airing, perhaps we will have a budget. But as we're doing the show today, no budget.
So you drive along, you see the outside of buildings, and you kind of compare it to what's it like back in Framingham or around here. This picture will
The
tell
Golden
you
Arches.
the McDonald's.
Yep.
Even if you don't know Russian, you can pick out the MAK instead of the MAC.
Yep.
And an H is a D, and an H is an N, and I don't know where you get the rest of it, but it's McDonald's. You can't miss it.
Now, did you go in there?
We did.
Good.
We did go into McDonald's. We had a lunch, because this is Moscow, and our meals were not, we had a tour and go out someplace for lunch, not in a street scene. Dinners often, my daughter would cook dinner at home, and my son-in-law would come home from work, and we would have dinner at home or at the apartment. So of course you recognize McDonald's. So now tell me about the next one. The next slide you'll recognize is called for dessert. 31,
Baskin-Robbins.
31 flavors.
Yep.
And let's see, Baskin, B-A-S, C is an S, Baskin, H is an N, and Robbins, the R is a P. Now, I did not learn Russian. My son-in-law knows Russian.
Oh, really?
And so he was able to converse and read signs, because he was making himself at home. He traveled back and forth quite a bit, and he conversed with people on the phone because he was working with the welfare agencies in Russia.
Okay. So he was totally able to converse in Russian.
He was able to converse in Russian, and of course, many of them spoke English, but if there is working with the welfare agencies, there may be different people who didn't know English.
Okay.
So he was there, and so we had our dessert. Okay, now again, you can look at this slide.
That's what, Shrek?
That's Shrek.
Okay.
So they have movies, Shrek 2, and that's bulletin boards you'd see around in the big
great.
cities. Nice shiny car, a little bit of a lady there with red hair, but those are the street scenes.
You know, it's amazing how you can travel all over the world, and there you are with Hollywood, with Shrek and McDonald's and Baskin-Robbins. So the United States seems to have influence everywhere.
When we were in China, we saw Walmarts,
Yep.
but I didn't see any Walmarts in Moscow. But
Okay.
maybe they'll get there next. So we were there to see the history, the politics, the culture, but we were also interested, since my son-in-law was working for Jewish agencies, we wanted to see some Jewish sites.
Okay.
So on the next slide is a memorial synagogue. This is not a synagogue where people observe, but it was set up in an area where they had a church and a synagogue as a memorial. So the Russian Jewish people funded this particular synagogue so they could design it the way they wanted to, and it wouldn't be done by the Russian government. And so it's near a park.
Did your son-in-law mention that there was there any kind of institutional anti-Semitism that he mentioned in Russia? I mean, we've of course heard about this over the centuries of pogroms and different things against different groups
my
of
grandparents came from Russia, Latvia, because of pogroms. They came from Kiev and from Vilna.
Okay.
But my grandfather left Russia because he didn't want to be in the army.
Okay.
But these days, there is the Jews are respected.
Okay.
In fact, I can tell you a story about one of the people I met that was a soldier in the war, Jewish, of course, and I mean, and he was treated very well. He said there wasn't anti-Semitism in the military.
Well, that's good to hear.
And that was World War II. I'm sure other people have other stories to tell. So you've seen our buildings and outside, and we got to come home with something to remember. This slide is again a sculpture in front of another synagogue, the welcoming hand, the peace symbol, the dove there. So this is in front of another synagogue. Now I think if we can talk a little bit about some of the things that we did. We visited the welfare agencies. The first tour we stopped at with our guide, arranged us to go to an area which you might call like a Jewish community center. And this is the next picture will show the director and the Jewish Welfare Center. And this is an area where they have classes for adults, for children.
Okay, so kind of a community center
after
situation.
School program.
Yep.
They provide food, entertainment. So that's I'm on the left, my wife's on the right, and the guide's she's the director of the welfare center.
And who's the young lady on the wall behind us?
Yeah, I guess artwork.
Artwork, okay.
So they have places to go, and one of the reasons my son-in-law was there is to know how the welfare centers are going and how to help the Jewish community in Russia, and in other areas of the former Soviet Union. So another area that we arranged to see was to go visit some people, families, and not that they were seniors.
Okay.
Which was called a warm home visit. We would go visit
This reminds me a little bit of your China trip. You went and spent some time with families.
With a family.
So it sounds to me like you, as a traveler, always like to get in and meet with the locals and see what's going on. And
that's the benefit of a guide and a translator.
Yep.
Because here these three couples, they meet once a month, and this is the time we came. They got their food together, and we through our translator we talked about some history.
Okay.
When we arrived, we had the food and wine for us, and we talked to each other through the translator, and then we had a dialogue. The fellow on the left actually was talking about his time in the service in the military. He actually at 17 volunteered for the military. And he walked to Poland from Moscow in the service, and then eventually he walked back and got out. And now he's retired, and their pension is $60 or $70 a month, which is not very much.
This is what, their military pension, or is this their entire?
Their military.
Okay.
They're trying to live on $70 a month, and that's why they need help from the welfare agents.
Okay.
And their healthcare system is abysmal. See, we didn't get to that kind of life, but they did say that's one thing that Russia, Soviet Union needs to come up to speed with the West and the United States in their healthcare system. But perestroika was a good opening for people to be able to talk and meet with people.
You know, it's interesting you bring up healthcare, Joel, because I have to tell you, for most Americans who probably take our healthcare for granted, we really have probably the best healthcare system. I don't say for everybody, but in general in the world.
I mean,
And I think
Sweden
sometimes we forget that.
I know they have a good healthcare system. Canada and has a healthcare system, but you have to wait in line if you have an operation.
Yes, yes. You have a lot of waiting, and I've met people, Canadians, who have said they've had to come to the United States and pay for their own MRIs and different medical treatment because the lines were so long and the supply of good physicians was in short supply to cover the demand. I'll put it that way. It was a supply and demand issue. But you learn these things. That's one of the wonderful things about traveling is when you come to these countries, Russia, China, wherever, and you ask questions and learn things, you sometimes come back to the United States and say, boy, am I glad I live here. This is
we
a
got
much better situation
special
than
health
there.
insurance
Yep.
when we traveled. Said that if we were sick, I want to be flown back to and not wait for my scheduled flight.
Yep.
If something goes wrong, I'm not going to a China or a Russian hospital on problems.
That's probably a good thing to buy, and I think American Express offers that, I know, and there are some other independent insurance agencies you can find online if you are planning to travel somewhere and want to buy extra insurance to have you medically evacuated should you need to be medically evacuated.
England or France, I wouldn't mind so much, but in these other countries, that was of concern. And these people told us that was their concern as well. And the veteran that we talked to, he wanted to know what was it like to be a veteran in the United States. And through the translator, my wife spoke to him. My wife's father was a veteran who worked at the VA hospital, and he was on a pension, our pensions, for a doctor retired from the VA hospital. But he was okay. He in the United States, when you get a pension, especially a doctor's pension,
he managed to have a comfortable lifestyle.
Quite life. I'm now retired, and I'm on Medicare and get a little income from Social Security, and so that is something we have a benefit here, but that's not true in Russia.
In Russia,
and so it's related to medicine too, because when you're older, you need to spend your money on medicine. So that we enjoy talking with the families there, or the senior people.
Now, is this a health care center we're looking at?
This is a factory now.
Oh, I apologize. It looked like a intravenous.
Yeah, well, this is a medical factory.
Oh, okay.
This factory was set up to give employment for some people, and to make devices that were not available in Russia. They made walkers and they made canes. They used pipes to make into a cane, and they sold these medical equipment to Israel and to Germany, and so it was related to the welfare agency, but it was an independent factory that was put things together.
So in other words, it was a little bit like we have with Goodwill Industries here in the United States, where a charitable organization sets up a business or manufacturing business.
And they were very successful.
Great.
They now make beds, and they make more complex equipment. So Michael here, the director, was very proud to show us the factory floor. And there are 60 people that they put employment to. Now, it's not a lot of people. It's not a big factory.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
But this was something now that was set up to show us things are progressing. So we got a taste of the business side of things, how the entertainment and the cultural centers.
Oh, this is what?
And this is me and my grandchildren. That's
a great picture.
This is my way to remember. I bought a Russian shirt.
Okay.
And as did my grandchildren. And this is how we remember our trip. And every once in a while, maybe Halloween or some other time I'll put on my shirt.
They're actually good-looking shirts. Now, this is what, traditional Russian garb?
This is well.
Now, when you were on the streets, did you see people wearing shirts like this? Or is this more what you'd call tourist?
Tourist, and maybe they'd have one for an occasion.
Okay.
But we bought it in a store. We could have bought some of them on a street vendor.
Yep.
But we went into a store to look at the selection.
This is more tourist attire.
I think that's true.
Okay. All right. Well, it was good looking.
So that's our souvenir, and that's how we. I look at my grandchildren now, which is 6 years ago. They're grown up, and that's it. We're ready to come home. My wife and I and my grandson Jacob is saying the goodbye picture, coming home.
Wonderful. Now, where did you fly into? Did you fly into New York?
No, well, we went Boston to Paris. I don't like to transfer in New York if I can, but we actually had a day.
I won't argue with you.
We had a day in Paris.
Okay.
Going and coming. So the first time we got there, we actually went from the Paris airport into the city.
Yep.
I think they took a bus.
Okay.
And walked around Paris for. I think we landed. You land in the morning when you leave here at night, and you land in there in the morning. And then we didn't leave Paris until I think it was 7 o'clock at night. And so we had the whole day to walk around.
Great.
When we went from Paris to St. Petersburg. Now we're expected to be met with our guide.
Do you remember at all how long a flight that was?
I think it was like a 4-hour flight, a 3-hour flight.
All right, so from here to Florida to Miami or something like that.
So if we left at 11:30, we got to there. And now this is night. So we had rented an apartment in St. Petersburg, and we had to say, okay, they were going to meet, somebody from the rental agency was going to meet us there. Well, we got there before they did, and we were looking around. Where's the apartment? How are we going to get in? And so our guide who had picked us up called on his cell phone, her cell phone, and eventually he showed up. Okay. The outside of the building was nothing to talk about. You go through an arcade and you go into a courtyard, and then you go up the. There's a 2-person elevator or a large marble staircase.
For me, I have to go alone, you know. Those 2-person elevators. Jack has to travel alone.
Or you walk the stairs. But we got there beforehand. Oh, he also wanted to be paid in euros.
Okay.
So
they didn't like the Russian money, or?
Well, they told us in advance that we should change money into euros.
Okay.
And so I did that in the Paris airport, and also in the Moscow airport.
Did they take credit cards in Russia? Do you remember if you were able to charge things on MasterCard or Visa?
I think in Moscow I may have.
Okay.
But we changed money. We used the money machines. They have a money.
Oh, okay. ATMs.
They have ATMs.
Great.
Not credit cards, but ATM machines.
Okay.
So you give
and convert your U.S. funds into Russian
local
money.
Russian money, but they wanted euros.
Okay.
For the rental of the apartment, and that was interesting because it was more money than I had to go in the Paris airport. And I only have, I think you have a $50 or $100 limit per transaction.
Okay.
And so I had to do it in 2 different credit cards in the airport in Paris, and I did the same thing in Moscow airport to get the euros.
To get the euros.
I guess I could have planned ahead differently, but that's what I had to do. Paid him in advance for the week's rental. Okay. I think it was.
Now, if you went back, do you think you would do the same thing with renting an apartment, or do you think you'd maybe stay in a hotel?
Well, for the 2 of us, we were 6 of us.
Let's say it was just you and the missus.
I would get the right kind of accommodations. If you're there for a week, I could see renting an apartment.
So you would recommend that to other people?
It can work out.
Okay.
What I recommend the most is having a guide or a translator.
Yep.
That, especially in Russia or China. Our next trip is going to be Eastern Europe.
Oh, really? Where are you going?
We're going to Budapest, Vienna, and Prague.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And we're going to do that on our own. We think we can.
I will tell you, Budapest, as you cross the main river downtown, central Budapest, there is this fabulous statue up on the top of a mountain that you absolutely will have to take a photograph of with everybody.
What's the statue of?
It is a woman of, the communists built it, so I don't know if it's, I think they call it a woman of freedom, but as I said, the communists built it, and when you travel through Budapest, you'll see how they're trying to still recover from so many years under communism.
I read ahead of time, and I'm reading about the location of the city. There's two cities, Buda and Pest, with a river in between.
Correct.
And
I believe this is on the Buda side.
I think the Pest side is a financial district. And I think actually the hotels we were looking at were in the financial district. I don't know if that's going to work out right, but
yeah, most of the major hotels. I know there's a Marriott down there. There's a very lovely Four Seasons. We're right near the river.
Yeah, they're right, but that's not where we stay. We don't stay in American hotels.
Okay.
We want 120 people, 20, 30 people hotel or.
So you like more of a boutique?
A boutique place.
Okay, very
bed
good.
And breakfast, if you might call it.
I'm with you. That's all right.
Well, bed and breakfast is often a house with only a half a dozen people. And you also find other people from England or Germany or Italy.
Other international travelers.
International travelers.
Well, I certainly hope that you will take pictures and come back
and
share Budapest with us. And you said Vienna?
And then Vienna.
Vienna is just a beautiful, beautiful city, and you will see, when you're in Vienna, you'll probably visit the former Habsburg palaces. Schönbrunn is one. There's another one as well. I think it's called Belvedere. I wasn't prepared for you to quiz me, but they will remind you a lot of what you shared with us today on the Russian palaces. They have those same kind of ornate fireplaces, those painted ceramic fireplaces in the corners of the rooms and everything, and a very similar kind of situation. Also, if you get a chance in Vienna, and I hope you'll go and bring pictures back, they have a museum of all the dishes, pots, pans, serving pieces that the royal family used.
The Habsburg
yes,
family.
That the Habsburg family used, and it's an entire museum.
Gold plates, I bet they are.
Well, gold-plated, a lot of silver, beautiful, but imagine a whole museum dedicated to dining service and parties.
And also music.
Yes.
I'm expecting to go to the opera in Vienna and to concerts in Budapest.
Oh, you'll enjoy that. And the food we'll get into on your visit.
Well, I don't know about that.
When are you taking this trip?
September.
Well, we're going to sign you up to come visit with us in October and November. And,
have you been to Prague?
I have not been to Prague. I've got that on my list of where I need to go.
Well, I'll tell you, we'll have to combine 3 different sites.
We'll do that.
And all 3.
And again, thank you to our audience. Please contact us. Maybe one of you have been to Prague, and you'll share that with us and educate me so that when I get to go, I'll know exactly what to do. So, Joel, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's always wonderful to spend the show with you. Your pictures are great. Your conversation is always wonderful, and it's just nice to have you.
Well, it's an education. That's why you travel.
Thank you so much.